Hello friends. Today we are going to just talk about lists in Python and why you would want to use lists and how you would use lists. So, as a very basic introduction, just think about the situation where you want to look at a list of numbers, like maybe the grades that you got on several assignments, and figure out what the average is. So just initially, you might just think, well, I'm going to have a number of variables where I'm going to have my grades for this assignment and my grades for that assignment. And as you keep going, you're just going to have to keep adding more and more. And so if I want to calculate the mean, I would do something like this, taking each individual variable, add them up, divide by the number of variables, and there we have the average. And you can see how, as you add variables, this process of adding them all together, that line of code would just get longer and longer and longer, and it would be very fixed to the certain number of grades that you want to have. And if you add or take away a grade, it's going to require you to change your code quite a bit, or somewhat significantly. So instead of having an individual variable for each grade, we can create a list that contains multiple values in it. So the difference between a regular variable and a list variable is that a regular variable is going to hold a single value, and a list variable is going to hold multiple values, as many as you want, and it can vary. It can start out with 3 or 4, and you can add and subtract variables, remove variables as needed. So earlier I had created a number list with some values in it. They could be grades or anything in this situation. And right now, this is what number list, that variable, looks like. This variable is a list, and so it contains many values in it. How many values does it contain? Well, I could count them up, but I'm going to let Python do that for me by calling the function len. And it tells me that there are 11 values in that list. It just so happens that Python has a built-in function called sum that will go through a list of numbers and add them all up. So if we call sum here on number list, it gives us that. And so now we can redo this previous line of code. Let's see, I'm going to call this, I think just call it the mean. Okay. Mean equals sum divided by the length, and we'll find out that the mean is approximately this value. Okay. Now, if we want to look at the values in the list, we can just have Python print out the list like this. But if I want to say what is the first value or what is the second value, I'm going to ask it basically using what we call the index. And so I'm going to say, this is the list I want to look inside, and I'm going to use square brackets to specify what the index is. So the first value is going to be at index 0. And so if I put 0 inside square brackets after the name of the list I'm interested in, it'll tell me that value. So indexes start at 0 and go up sequentially. And so one thing that you'll notice as you work with lists is that whatever the length is, that value, in this case 11, that's how many items are in the list, and that value is one more than the highest index I can specify. And that's because indexes start at 0. So I can look at number list index 0, index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But if I try to look at 11, it's going to give me an error. So to show you, number 10, index 10, that would be the last item in the list. And now if I try to go one more, it's going to give me an error. And in particular, this error, it says index error. List index is out of range. In other words, there is no 11th, there is no item at index 11. The 11th item in the list is at index 10 because the first item in the list is at index 0. And if that's confusing, that's normal at first, and you just get used to it as you keep working with lists. So we saw how we could use sum and len, length, those two functions, to calculate the mean of a list of numbers really quickly. Now let's say we wanted to calculate the median or the mode. Well, the median is one of two things depending on if your list is actually has an even or an odd number of items in it. So for the median, if your list has an odd number of items, it's pretty simple because you go to the middle item, and that is the median. And if you're working with lists, this is really easy because you can pretty simply calculate what the index of the middle item is when you know how many items are in the array or the list. And now mode is going to be slightly more complicated, and it's actually possible for a list or an array to have more than one mode. So it's different from median and mean that way. Okay, but let's look at, so what would you do to calculate the median? Well, let's say again, let's just again look at the length of this list. Okay, the length is 11, and the list looks like this. There are 3 4s, 4 5s, and 4 6s. And if we just look from the outside in, we'll find that the middle value, the median value, is 5. How could we do that not just sort of visually or using our fingers or whatever? How could we have the computer do that? Well, it's going to turn out that if you take the length of the list and you subtract 1, and then you divide that value by 2, that gives you, in this case, the value 5. That's the index of the middle item in the array, or the list. I keep using both terms because in general and in other programming languages, this sort of data structure would be called an array, but in Python they're called lists, and it's exactly the same thing. So that's how you could find the median value, or calculate the index of the middle value. What's the central value in the array? You subtract 1 and half that number. And in this case, it's showing the value 5.0, which is an indication that Python is treating this as a floating point number. And actually, if we're going to use it as an index in an array or a list, it needs to be an integer value. So what we would do is we would use this function int to convert this whole value, the value, the whole expression, from the floating point 5.0 to the integer 5. So if we say, actually do it like this. We say index equals that, and then we look at this, it's going to show us 5 because that's the median value. All right, I thought I would maybe go into mode, but I think I'm going to save that for another stream. So thanks for joining me for this very short stream about lists in Python. I hope you found it useful, and we'll just keep looking through these fundamental values, these fundamentals of Python. I hope you join me again next time.